Marcus clutched his stomach as another wave of hunger hit him. The 14-year-old boy pressed his back against the cold brick wall of the abandoned warehouse, pulling his thin jacket tighter around his shoulders. 3 days without food, and the December wind cut through his clothes like ice daggers. Snow began falling again, adding to the white blanket that covered the empty lot where he'd made his temporary shelter. He reached for the only valuable thing he owned, a thick woolen blanket his mother had given him before she died 2 years ago. It was military green, worn but still warm, with small holes that told stories of countless nights under the stars. The blanket had kept him alive through 2 harsh winters on the streets of Detroit. Child Services had lost track of him months ago when he'd run from his 3rd foster home. Some homes were worse than the streets. As Marcus wrapped the blanket around himself, he heard a sound that made his blood freeze. A mechanical whirring followed by a thunderous crash echoed from the other side of the warehouse. Orange light flickered against the snow-covered ground, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. Every instinct told him to run, but curiosity and the bitter cold kept his feet planted. He crept around the corner of the building and stopped dead in his tracks. What he saw defied everything he thought he knew about the world. A sleek silver craft about the size of a school bus lay crumpled against a pile of concrete blocks. Steam rose from its twisted hull, and strange symbols glowed faintly along its side. The metal looked like nothing he'd ever seen. It seemed to shift and flow like liquid even while solid. A hatch on the side of the craft suddenly burst open with a hiss of escaping gases. Marcus stumbled backward, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. A figure emerged from the wreckage, and Marcus had to bite his tongue to keep from screaming. The being stood nearly 7 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the firelight. Its limbs were longer and thinner than human proportions, ending in hands with 6 fingers each. Most unsettling were its eyes, large silver orbs that reflected light like mirrors. The creature wore what looked like a form-fitting suit, made of the same flowing metal as its ship. The alien took 3 steps before collapsing to its knees in the snow. Dark purple liquid seeped from a wound on its side, staining the white ground. It pressed one of its 6-fingered hands against the injury, and Marcus could see the creature shaking. Whether from cold, pain, or fear, he couldn't tell. Marcus knew he should run. Every survival instinct screamed at him to get as far away as possible, but as he watched the alien struggle to breathe, creating small puffs of vapor in the frigid air, something inside him rebelled against the idea of leaving any living thing to suffer alone. He'd spent too many nights cold and afraid to ignore that familiar look of desperation. The alien's breathing became more labored. Its silver eyes dimmed, and it swayed dangerously. Marcus realized with growing horror that the creature was dying. Whatever it was, wherever it came from. It was experiencing the same thing he'd felt so many times, the gradual surrender that came when hope ran out. Without thinking, Marcus stepped forward. The alien's head snapped up, and those mirror-like eyes fixed on him with startling intensity. For a moment, neither moved. Marcus could see his own reflection in the creature's gaze, a scrawny kid with dirty brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. He probably looked as strange to the alien as it did to him. The creature made a sound, something between a whisper and a musical note. It raised one hand, palm outward, in what Marcus somehow understood as a peaceful gesture. The alien was trying to show it meant no harm, despite being twice Marcus's size and obviously from somewhere beyond Earth. Marcus looked down at his blanket, then back at the dying creature. The alien was shivering violently now, its breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. Purple blood continued to seep from its wound, melting the snow around it into dark slush. In that moment, Marcus saw past the strange appearance and recognized something universal: suffering. His mother's voice echoed in his memory from years ago. "Marcus, honey, Being human isn't about what you have. It's about what you're willing to give when you have nothing left. With trembling hands, Marcus unwrapped his precious blanket from around his shoulders. The cold immediately attacked his thin frame, but he ignored it. He approached slowly, keeping his movements gentle and non-threatening. The alien watched him with those unblinking silver eyes, its expression unreadable but somehow conveying surprise. When Marcus was close enough to touch the creature, he carefully draped his mother's blanket over its broad shoulders. The wool looked small against the alien's frame, but it covered the worst of the shivering. The creature looked down at the gift, then back at Marcus with what could only be described as wonder. The alien reached out with one long finger and gently touched Marcus's hand. The contact sent a strange, tingling sensation up his arm. Not unpleasant, but definitely not human. In that touch, Marcus felt something impossible. Images flashed through his mind, distant stars, cities that floated in clouds, beings of incredible beauty and intelligence working together across vast distances. He saw the creature's name, Zixthara, which meant guardian of the small lights in its language. Zixthara spoke again, and this time Marcus understood. Not the words, but the meaning behind them. Gratitude deeper than any human emotion he'd ever experienced. The alien was thanking him not just for the blanket, but for choosing compassion over fear. "You're welcome," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. The alien pulled the blanket tighter around itself and struggled to its feet. It looked at its damaged ship, then back at Marcus. With obvious effort, Zixthara reached into a pouch on its suit and pulled out what looked like a small, crystalline device. It pressed the object into Marcus's palm and closed the boy's fingers around it. The crystal was warm and seemed to pulse with inner light. As Marcus held it, he felt strength flowing into his tired body and warmth spreading from his chest to his extremities. The gnawing hunger that had been his constant companion for days began to fade. Zixthara placed both hands on Marcus's shoulders and looked directly into his eyes. In that gaze, Marcus saw promise, not just of reward, but of recognition. The alien had seen something in Marcus's act of kindness that went beyond simple charity. It had witnessed the rare human ability to choose sacrifice over self-preservation. With visible effort, Zixthara returned to its ship. Marcus watched as the alien began working on some kind of communication device, occasionally looking back at him with those remarkable silver eyes. The creature was clearly trying to contact someone, though Marcus had no idea who or what. As dawn began to break over the industrial district, Marcus settled back against the warehouse wall, still clutching the strange crystal. The device continued to warm his hands and ease his hunger, but more importantly, it represented something he'd almost forgotten existed: hope. For the first time in months, Marcus allowed himself to believe that things might actually get better. He watched the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant colors, reflecting off the alien's damaged ship like a beacon. Whatever happened next, Marcus knew his life had just taken a turn toward something extraordinary. The homeless boy who had nothing left to give except kindness was about to discover that sometimes the universe has a way of noticing such gestures. The crystal pulsed gently in his hands, and Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks. He had no way of knowing that his simple act of compassion had just set in motion events that would change not only his life, but the entire future of humanity. Marcus woke to the sound of engines unlike anything he'd ever heard. The crystal in his hand pulsed with urgent warmth as 3 sleek ships descended from the cloudy morning sky. These vessels were larger than Zixthara's craft and completely undamaged, their surfaces rippling with the same liquid metal appearance. They landed with impossible grace in the empty lot, barely disturbing the snow. Hatches opened simultaneously, and Marcus gasped as dozens of beings emerged. They looked similar to Zixthara but came in different colors, some with skin like polished copper, others with hides that shifted between deep purple and silver. All wore the same flowing metal suits, and all moved with a purpose that made Marcus's heart race. Zixthara stepped forward from the group, no longer wounded. The alien had somehow healed during the night, though it still wore Marcus's blanket like a cape of honor. When their eyes met, Marcus felt that strange, tingling sensation again, followed by a flood of understanding. The beings surrounding them weren't just any aliens. They were the Kithara, an ancient coalition of species that had spent millennia traveling the galaxy. They served as guardians, protectors, and judges of civilizations throughout the cosmos. Zixthara held the title of First Seeker, one of the most respected positions in their society. What Marcus had done the night before wasn't just an act of kindness to a stranded traveler. He had saved the life of someone whose death would have been mourned across 1,000 worlds. More importantly, his willingness to sacrifice his most precious possession for a complete stranger, and an alien one at that, had revealed something the Kithara had been searching for across the galaxy. A being with copper-colored skin approached Marcus, moving with fluid grace. This one was smaller than Zixthara, with eyes that held flecks of gold alongside the silver. When it spoke, Marcus understood the words as clearly as if they were spoken in English. "Young human, I am Velnara, speaker for the Kithara Council. What you have done has echoed across our communications network to every corner of known space. In giving your blanket to our first seeker, you have demonstrated something we have encountered in only 7 other species among the thousands we have catalogued." Marcus clutched the crystal tighter, feeling its warmth pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "I don't understand. I just didn't want anyone to be cold." Velnara's expression, somehow readable despite the alien features, showed something like amazement. "That is precisely why your action is so significant. You possessed almost nothing, yet you gave freely. You faced the unknown with compassion rather than fear. Most remarkably, you made this choice without expectation of reward or even survival." Another alien stepped forward, this one with skin that shifted between deep blue and violet. The patterns seemed to indicate high rank among the Kithara. "I am Korathek, keeper of the Great Archive. For 3,000 years, we have been searching for species that demonstrate what we call the elevation principle, the ability to transcend self-interest for the welfare of others, especially those who are different or unknown." Marcus looked around at the gathered aliens, noting how they all seemed to defer to Zixthara despite the presence of these other important figures. The first seeker stepped closer and placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. Through their strange connection, Marcus understood Zixthara's thoughts. The first seeker had been on a mission to Earth, one of thousands of scouting expeditions to catalog humanity's development. Most species were observed for centuries before any contact was made. Humanity was still considered too young, too violent, too unpredictable for membership in the galactic community. But Marcus's simple act had changed everything. "Your species has shown great potential," Velnara continued, "but also great capacity for destruction. We have watched humans wage wars, poison their own planet, and show remarkable cruelty to their own kind. Yet we have also observed extraordinary acts of creativity, love, and sacrifice. You, Marcus Chen, have provided us with definitive proof that humanity possesses the elevation principle." Marcus blinked in surprise. He had never told them his last name, but somehow they knew it. They probably knew everything about him now: his dead mother, his absent father, his time in foster care, his months on the streets. The thought should have been frightening, but the crystal in his hand radiated such peace that fear seemed impossible. Korthek activated a device that projected a 3-dimensional map into the air above them. Marcus saw the galaxy spread out in stunning detail, with countless points of light representing worlds and civilizations. Some lights pulsed with golden colors, others remained dim white or red. The golden lights represent species that have achieved elevation and joined our coalition, Korthek explained. They work together to explore the universe, share knowledge, and protect younger civilizations from threats they are not yet ready to face. The red lights are species that have failed the principle and destroyed themselves or others. The white lights are those still being observed. Marcus watched as Earth's light slowly shifted from white to gold before his eyes. Because of your demonstration of the elevation principle, humanity will be offered membership in the Kythera Coalition, Velnara announced. But this honor comes with great responsibility. Your species must prove that your capacity for compassion is not limited to isolated individuals. Zixthara stepped forward and unwrapped Marcus's blanket from around its shoulders. The alien held the worn wool reverently, as if it were made of precious metal. Through their connection, Marcus understood that this blanket would become something extraordinary, a symbol that would be preserved and honored across the galaxy. This gift will be placed in the Great Archive, Korthek said solemnly. Future generations of 1,000 species will learn about the human boy who gave his only source of warmth to a dying stranger. But more than a symbol, it will serve as proof that even the smallest acts of compassion can change the fate of entire worlds. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was hearing. Yesterday, he had been a homeless kid worried about his next meal. Now he was somehow responsible for humanity's introduction to a galactic community. The crystal in his hand pulsed more strongly, and he realized it was helping him process emotions and concepts that would normally be too much for any human mind. "What happens to me?" he asked quietly. Velnara smiled, an expression that translated perfectly across species lines. "You have choices, young human. You may return to your life on Earth, though we will ensure you never want for anything again. You may come with us to learn about the galaxy and serve as humanity's first ambassador. Or you may choose a path we have never offered before, to help us guide your species through the elevation process." The third option sent shivers through Marcus that had nothing to do with the cold. Through the crystal's influence, he could sense the magnitude of such a responsibility. He would become a bridge between humanity and the cosmos, helping his species learn to transcend their worst impulses and embrace their potential for greatness. "There is one more thing you must understand," Zixthara communicated directly to his mind. "Your act of kindness was observed not just by us, but by entities that oppose the Kythera Coalition. There are species in the galaxy that believe compassion is weakness, that only the strong deserve to survive. They have been watching humanity as well, hoping to recruit your species as soldiers in an ancient conflict." Marcus felt a chill that the crystal couldn't warm away. "What kind of conflict?" Korthek's expression grew grave. "A war between those who believe in elevation through cooperation and those who practice elevation through domination. Your choice to help Zixthara has declared which side humanity might join, but the destroyers will not accept this outcome without challenge." As if summoned by the mention of their name, the sky suddenly darkened with unnatural clouds. The Kythera immediately formed a protective circle around Marcus, their peaceful demeanor replaced by alert readiness. Above them, shapes began moving in the clouds, ships with angular, aggressive designs that seemed to cut through the air rather than flow with it. "The destroyers respond quickly when a new species shows potential," Velnara said, her voice tight with concern. "They will try to demonstrate that your compassion makes humanity weak and vulnerable." Marcus looked at the crystal in his hand, watching its light pulse faster and brighter. Somehow he knew that what happened in the next few minutes would determine not just his own fate, but the future path of every human being on Earth. The homeless boy who had given away his last possession was about to face a test that would prove whether humanity truly deserved a place among the stars. The first destroyer ship broke through the clouds, its weapons already charging with malevolent energy. Marcus gripped the crystal tighter and made his choice. The destroyer ship dove toward them like a metallic predator, its hull bristling with weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Marcus expected the Cathara to fight back, but instead they maintained their protective formation around him, their hands empty of weapons. "Why aren't you defending yourselves?" Marcus shouted over the growing roar of approaching engines. Zixthara's mental voice reached him clearly despite the chaos. "Because, young Marcus, true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the courage to protect without becoming the thing you fight against." The first energy blast struck the ground near the Kithara ships, sending up a shower of molten earth and snow. The aliens didn't even flinch. Instead, they began to sing, a harmonious sound that seemed to resonate with the very air around them. The crystal in Marcus's hand responded to the song, its light growing so bright that he had to squint against its brilliance. More destroyer ships descended from the clouds, at least a dozen of them surrounding the small gathering. Their designs were all sharp angles and aggressive curves, like flying weapons rather than vessels. As they drew closer, Marcus could see the beings inside, tall, armored figures with faces hidden behind angular masks that gleamed with red light. The lead destroyer ship touched down with an impact that shook the ground. A ramp extended, and out walked a figure that made Marcus's blood run cold. This being stood 9 feet tall, covered in black armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When it spoke, its voice cut through the Cathara's song like a knife through silk. "Cathara fools," the destroyer commander said. Its words somehow translated into Marcus's mind with harsh clarity. "You corrupt another species with your weakness. This human child gave away his protection to an unknown alien. Such stupidity would have led to his death in any civilized galaxy." Velnara stepped forward, her copper skin gleaming with resolve. "Commander Vraknos, your definition of civilization has always differed from ours. What you call stupidity, we recognize as the highest form of evolution." The destroyer commander laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Evolution? Your pet human would have frozen to death in the snow if we had not arrived to demonstrate reality." "Watch, child," Vraknos said, turning its attention to Marcus, "as we show you what your kindness truly accomplished." With a gesture from the commander, several smaller destroyer ships streaked away toward the distant city. Marcus watched in horror as they headed toward downtown Detroit, where thousands of people were beginning their morning routines, completely unaware that humanity had just made first contact with alien life. "Stop!" Marcus yelled, stepping forward before any of the Cathara could hold him back. "Leave them alone! This is between us!" Vraknos tilted its armored head, studying the 14-year-old boy with predatory interest. Interesting. The weak human shows protective instincts. But protection requires power, child. Your Kithara friends offer you songs and crystals. We offer strength enough to guard your entire species. The commander activated a device on its gauntlet, and suddenly Marcus could see through the eyes of the destroyer pilots approaching the city. Their ship's weapons were charging, preparing to strike civilian targets. Shopping centers, schools, hospitals, all chosen specifically to cause maximum terror and casualties. "One word from me," Vraknos continued, "and your kind will learn that compassion invites destruction. But join us willingly, abandon these singing fools, and we will spare your cities. We will teach your species to be strong, to take what they need rather than give what they cannot afford to lose." Marcus felt the crystal burning in his palm, its light now almost too bright to look at directly. Through its energy, he could sense something the destroyer commander couldn't, the true nature of the test taking place. This wasn't just about choosing sides in a galactic war. This was about proving that humanity's capacity for compassion could withstand the ultimate challenge. You're right about one thing, Marcus said quietly, his voice growing stronger with each word. Protection requires power, but you're wrong about what kind of power matters. He raised the crystal above his head, and its light exploded outward in a brilliant wave that washed over everyone present. In that light, Marcus shared what he had learned in 2 years on the streets, that true strength came not from being able to hurt others, but from being willing to suffer for them. The light reached the destroyer ship speeding toward the city, and something extraordinary happened. Instead of destroying the vessels, the energy interfaced with their navigation systems. Marcus, guided by instincts he didn't fully understand, sent a simple message through the crystal's power: images of human kindness. The destroyer pilots suddenly found their minds flooded with scenes from Earth's history. They saw humans running into burning buildings to save strangers, sharing their last scraps of food with hungry children, and risking their lives to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. They witnessed the countless small acts of daily compassion that defined humanity at its best. More importantly, they saw Marcus himself, not as he appeared to them now, but as he had been the night before. A cold, hungry, desperate child who had chosen to give his only source of warmth to a dying alien rather than preserve his own life. They felt the hunger gnawing at his stomach, the cold biting through his thin clothes, and the profound loneliness of having no one in the world who cared whether he lived or died. And they understood that despite all of this, he had chosen love over fear. The destroyer ships stopped their attack runs and began returning to the industrial district. When they landed, their pilots emerged with their weapons powered down. One by one, they removed their intimidating masks, revealing faces that were surprisingly similar to humans. If humans had silver skin and eyes that glowed with inner fire. Commander Vraknos stared in disbelief as its own soldiers approached the Kithara with expressions of wonder rather than hostility. "What have you done?" the commander demanded. "I showed them what you never could," Marcus replied, the crystal's light beginning to fade back to its normal, gentle glow. "I showed them that being strong enough to destroy doesn't make you powerful. Being willing to sacrifice for others, that's what makes you truly strong." Zixathera stepped beside Marcus, radiating pride and amazement through their mental connection. "The elevation principle is not just about individual acts of compassion," the first seeker explained to the gathering of aliens. "It is about the power of such acts to inspire others, to spread like ripples across the fabric of consciousness itself." Velnara addressed Commander Vraknos directly. "Your people have spent millennia believing that strength comes from conquest and domination. But strength that requires you to diminish others is not strength at all. It is fear masquerading as power. This human child has demonstrated something your entire empire has forgotten." One of the former destroyer pilots approached Marcus hesitantly. When it spoke, its voice carried none of the harsh authority of its commander. "Human child, your thoughts showed us memories of beings called teachers who sacrificed their advantage to help others learn. Are there many such beings among your kind?" Marcus thought of his mother, who had worked 2 jobs to keep him fed and clothed, and of the foster parents who had genuinely tried to help him despite his resistance. He thought of strangers who had shared food with him on the coldest nights, and of other homeless people who had looked out for each other when no one else would. "Yeah," he said simply, "there are lots of people like that." The crystal in his hand pulsed one final time, and Marcus suddenly understood his choice with perfect clarity. He looked at Velnara and Zixathara, then at the former destroyer pilots who watched him with newfound respect. "I want to help," he said. "Not just humanity, but all of them." He gestured toward the destroyer soldiers. "They're not evil. They're just scared and trying to survive in the only way they know how. If showing them a different way is possible, then that's what I want to do." Commander Vraknos, now abandoned by its own troops, stood alone in its dark armor. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind blowing across the empty lot. Then slowly, the commander reached up and removed its own mask. The face beneath was scarred and weary, with eyes that held centuries of pain. "You would trust us?" Vraknos asked. "After we threatened your world?" Marcus walked over to where his blanket lay in the snow, picked it up, and approached the destroyer commander. Without hesitation, he draped the worn wool around the alien's broad shoulders. "Everyone deserves to be warm," he said. Years later, when historians from 1,000 worlds wrote about the day humanity joined the galactic community, they would focus on the political ramifications and the technological advances that followed. But the beings who were actually present that morning in a Detroit industrial district never forgot the simple truth they witnessed. A homeless boy with nothing left to give had not only saved the life of an alien stranger, but had fundamentally changed the nature of galactic civilization itself. The destroyer empire dissolved within a decade, its former soldiers becoming some of the most passionate advocates for the elevation principle. The Cathara coalition expanded to include hundreds of species that had previously been too afraid or too aggressive to join. Marcus Chen became the first human ambassador to the galaxy, but he insisted on spending half his time on Earth, working with homeless children and teaching them that kindness was never wasted. The crystal that had started it all was eventually duplicated and distributed to every member world of the coalition, serving as both a communication device and a reminder of the power of compassion. And in the Great Archive, preserved under crystalline fields that would protect it for millions of years, a worn woolen blanket with small holes and faded green color stood as proof that sometimes the smallest acts of love could indeed change everything.